It is simply not enough to keep your kids from watching movies or having access to the internet when they are in your home. No matter what you do, the magical dark liturgy that runs 24/7 will still be out there. But teaching your children to hate it is far more important than keeping it hidden away from them. They should learn specifically why they ought to despise everything from Trash World, and you must raise them among others who understand the same. The network of friends and family you interact with regularly is the soil your children are growing up in. If they are alone and isolated, if the only friends they have are entranced with Trash World, no matter how much effort you expend homeschooling and keeping evil things from their eyes, they will be vulnerable. More than anything, you and your wife and your children need friends who love what you love and hate what you hate.
The way that you write, Andrew, I think is helpful. It's,
thank you.
Straight to the point. It gets. I think it's good, but it's entertaining.
Like I said in the beginning, it's my kind of book. It's something that is accessible to just about anybody. It's understandable by just about anybody. And honestly, I believe, there's different people need different styles, but I believe that to confront Trash World, you need to be kind of shocked into it a little bit. You need to jump right into the ice water and just get that shock to your system. Yeah. Because it's almost like resetting yourself a little bit, because this has been the air we've breathed since we, went to kindergarten. Mm-hmm. I know probably some of you guys can remember, like, early on in your education, things that you were taught or told or you saw in the movies that they're evil. Yeah. And you didn't know it. And so you went years and years getting the same doctrine, and it was evil doctrine, but you thought it was good. Right. Yeah. And so you need to be slapped in the face, metaphorically speaking, of course. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe literally.
Maybe literally too, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. Absolutely. Brotherhood. That's kind of the big theme that we're going to be discussing in this chapter. But really, this is our final conclusion to this series that we're doing. And we're going to hit, in this episode, we want to try to hit multiple different themes all together. But we want to talk about brotherhood. We've already talked about worship. And so for those who are just tuning in, you can go back and check out that episode. But the whole idea is, the first half of Andrew's book deals with, here's Donner's Oak, here's Trash World, here's the idol, let's chop it down. But the second half is dealing with, okay, but what do we build in its place? We want to actually do something. Yeah. W's in the chat, white pills for everyone, so what can we actually do? So part 2 is transforming the felled trees of Trash World into new Christendom. And for those who, again, are just maybe tuning in on this last episode, what we did is we talked about masculine economics. We talked about how the last generation, the boomers, how they can help us, that times are harder for us. They had 7 years of plenty. We have 7 years of famine. That doesn't mean that they didn't work hard. They worked extremely hard, but their work produced more than hard work does today. But they can help by passing down generational wealth to their righteous posterity, and absolutely writing out of their will any kids that have apostatized. That is the biblical model, who don't love the Lord. So that's one way that we win. We win by being multi-generational, the family unit working together, generational wealth. We also win by worship. We said that was the big idea, the tip of the spear. We need to make liturgy great again. Yeah. That was one of the things that we talked about, like understanding that we're rooted in tradition. When none of us are doing life in a vacuum, none of us are doing theology in a vacuum. We're all product of place and time. And in the marvelous mercy of God, our place and time is pretty good in the sense that we're coming on, seated on top of 1,500 years of Christendom, and like incredible confessions and liturgies and theology, and a lot of heavy lifting that's already been done for us. We just have to dust it off and actually, read it, understand it, and seek to apply it. Like we have Protestant political theology. Yeah. If we would just use it, instead of saying, "Oh, these guys were monsters," but instead, what we do is, we build the tombs, for the prophets, and we talk about how we would, we love Calvin and we love Luther and we love Knox, but if anybody who actually reads them, really reads them, and says, "Hey, maybe they had some pretty good ideas that might help with our current situation," that person is anathematized.
Yeah, you're bad.
You're bad. Yeah. So all that being said, tradition is good. So we talked about generational, the generations working together, worship being the tip of the spear, worship being warfare. And within that worship conversation, we talked about tradition, that we have a Protestant worship tradition. It's a good thing. We shouldn't throw it away. For this, the goal would be kind of wrapping up here at the very end, Brotherhood, Made for War. These are the last few chapters of his book, but Brotherhood, Made for War, A New Eve, and the Paideia of Christendom. So we're going to be talking about, mainly that cold open comes from your Brotherhood chapter, but talking about brotherhood, flesh and blood. We've already talked about this some, talking about that, but then putting in some of the pieces of rescuing Eve, the Paideia, Christian education for our kids, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You start with Brotherhood, I think, because that makes all of the rest of it easier.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't do this alone. No matter how good you think you do alone, you actually don't do that well alone. I mean, God says as much.
Right.
In the garden,
It's not just about Eve. It's about humanity in general.
That's right. Exactly. There's an application for everyone. It was not good for him to be alone.
Right.
And so that's where you start.
Only thing in creation not good.
Yeah.
Right. And part of the reason it's not good to be alone, going back to the episode right before this, is because we do, God has made us differently. We don't live in a world of androgyny where everybody's the same. Division of labor is a good thing.
Yeah.
Division of labor is not like this. And so it's kind of funny. It's like people, so some people are disenchanted with trash world. Some people call it clown world, whatever, and a lot of us have, woken up and especially the past 3 years since 2020 and COVID, and we're like, this is bad. And it's funny how like a lot of people's natural reactions, they're like, well, I got to do something. And so it's like, I'm going to learn how to make shoes and homestead and grow food. And, and it's like,
which is great.
That's great. But like, if I could just be honest, all right, behind every homesteading woman on Instagram is a man who works in software.
Yes, right.
So first, let's just start there. Like let's just be honest. Like I like these guys.
Yeah.
I like them.
They're great. I know many of them.
Groves.
Yeah.
I'll just say he's a great guy. And I think he's got some the durable trades. I've read the book. I've had him on my podcast before. But he will tell you like that he was able to do all of it because he made a lot of money in software.
Yeah.
I've got men in my church who have 40 acres and they have, they have cows and they have this and all that's kind of stuff and chickens. One of the guys in my church, he has, about 1,500 chickens, their own chicken business. And it's great. It's teaching the kids hard work. It's teaching them economics. And everything's paid for in software. The chickens breaks even. He said that they barely even make a profit.
Yeah, it's the reward for the work that they've done. And that's how we should look at it. It's not like, oh, it's fake, it's a LARP, it's not real. No, it's instead of, buying the vacation home or having, the big, huge 401k and things like that, they probably have, savings and things like that too. But this is the reward for all the hard work they've done in a different domain.
Right.
Right.
But that's different. The homesteading being the reward for hard work is very different than saying homesteading will be the work that will sustain you.
Yeah, it'll be
that's just not true.
Yeah.
It's just not true. We're not going back. That's not going to happen. That might happen but if we get to there, it's going to be like most of us will be dead by the time we get. That's a post-apocalyptic. The whole world is almost ended.
What will happen is like you and your 10 sons, if you have that many, are not going to be able to defend your homestead with your ARs against the hordes of people that are going to come raid you.
Exactly.
In a post-apocalyptic world.
I tell guys that all the time. It's like, well, if it gets bad, I've got a garden. And it's like, I appreciate it. And if you want to do that because again, you're teaching, I think the discipleship is valuable. And I think that just literally having your hands in the dirt is good for the soul. I think it's just good. So I'm all about that for spiritual formation. Just being a good godly person, teaching your children something. Not having everything outsourced. That there's actually yard work. There are chores to be done around the house.
And eating food that you grew and raised is like good for the soul too.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely,
that's actually good for the body.
Yeah, in every sense. Yeah,
right. So that's great. But what I was going to say is like, with all that, but the person who's thinking, because a lot of people, they're thinking fear-based. So it's not like this is just a good habit.
Yeah, this is
where my ancestors come from, and we need to be connected to our heritage and remember these things and teach. Praise God, all that's great. But a lot of people, it's a Mad Max kind of thing. It's like, this is how we're going to make it when everyone else dies. It's like, if things get that bad, you think they're not coming for your garden?
Yeah, they're coming to you.
You would be better off with your MREs that are in a locked up container inside your house where they can't get in, than your garden that's outside where they can just walk. So anyway, do it as a spiritual formation, teaching your kids discipleship, hard work, economics, all that kind of stuff. But this is not going to replace your day job. Like I was talking to Michael Foster about this, and they got like a small farm, and he was like, you know why nobody, everybody's excited about homesteading now. Everybody's going to be over it in 5 years. But he said, everybody's excited about it right now. He said, but you know why nobody was doing this? He's like, nobody was doing it because it sucks.
It's a lot of work.
He's like, it's terrible.
Yeah.
He's like, farming's really hard.
Yeah.
Like really hard.
There's a lot of poop you got to deal with.
Yeah. He's like, it's really, really hard. And so anyways, all that being said, my point is back to the brotherhood, division of labor is that this is one of the blessings of, I think, that like post-millennialism and Christendom, and Christ's kingdom expanding, is that we've realized like this is 1 Corinthians chapter 12, different parts of the body, eyes and ears, and like it just applied to a different realm of human life. But it is a gift and a blessing that I don't have to do everything. There was a time not that long ago where one family, they had to make their own shoes. They had to sew their own clothes. They had to grow their own food. That like every single basic need had to be met by that family. Nothing was outsourced.
No division of labor whatsoever.
And so as that applies to a brotherhood, so not just one family, right? So it's not just the guerrilla warfare, but you actually have organized platoons, and not just I've got all my brotherhood virtually on the internet, but we actually live in the same locale. We're part of the same church community. We're being shaped by the same liturgy, the same text, the same worship, Lord's Day in and out. Part of the beauty of that is we're also going to have different giftings that helps with a parallel, Christian economy. It also helps with the education of our children.
Yeah.
None of us is ever going to say anything negative about homeschooling. Homeschooling is, praise God. Like, it's wonderful. But one thing that I think is cool about Christian schools, there's a lot of cool things, a few, but one thing is within, Christian classical, or even if it's not classical, the Christian school mentality is that, I remember here, I think it was actually Lexi, Brian Sauvé's wife, talking about this on Bright Hearth, but she said, she's like, at first I was like, but it's fathers, fathers train up your children, and like education falls on fathers. And I get that. That's true. She was like, but Brian's not doing it. Like, yeah, he's involved, but he outsourced to me because he has to go out of the home to work to provide. And then she was like, and then even with me, I order books. It's curriculum. I'm not writing the curriculum. Like, and she was like, and then even when we do, when I cook for the family, like fathers have this obligation to provide the education for their children, but also to provide food. But we're willing to outsource that, to take our money and buy the food from the farmer who sold it to the gracious. We are constantly doing that. So to say that you must homeschool, so homeschooling is great, but to go so far to say you must homeschool,
it's mandated. I
think that's silly. And what happens when you begin to outsource things is you get some of the best things. You get the best food, the best produce, the best shoes. If I was making my own shoes, they'd be rough.
They'd be pretty bad.
And likewise with education, this is not to say that parents aren't uniquely equipped by God to educate their own children. I know they can do it.
Absolutely.
I believe they can do it. But it is to say that those parents are ultimately going to oversee the education of their children. They're going to be involved in many ways, but then you're pulling from all the parents in your church community. And you know what? A couple of them know trigonometry, and I can't even pronounce the word. So it might be nice for my children to cross-pollinate a little bit with that dad and that mom, as well as, of course, their dad and mom. So the brotherhood, I mean, it plays into everything. It plays into the paideia, it plays into the school, education of children. It plays into work, parallel Christian economy, all these different things. And it's also, I just felt like it was a great opportunity to say something negative about homesteading. So, there you go.
All right, I'm just going to say it. This show is fantastic. You know it's fantastic. I know it's fantastic, but I'm willing to admit there is one singular problem: the waiting zone. Right? You got to wait a whole week for each new episode of this show to drop on Fridays at 4 p.m. Central Time. Unless you go on over to patreon.com/Right Response Ministries. And then you'll be able to binge watch every single episode of an entire season all in one day. So this is a season-based show. right? The whole idea is a deep dive on one singular topic so that you know everything there is to know. Each season comes out in a quarter, right? So a 3-month period, anywhere from probably 8 to 12 episodes in a season. And the moment that the first episode of a new season drops to the public, then you can go over to patreon.com/Right Response Ministries and watch all of those episodes without having to wait week by week by week for the next episode to publicly drop. So, you know what to do. Don't waste any more time. Binge watch the whole season today.
Well, I mean, I can speak positively of homesteading a little bit. Because I mean, yeah, all we have is a garden. My wife is like, "Oh, I'd love to have chickens," and I'm like, "Yeah, you say that now. Right. You say that now, but yeah, we'd love to have land and have be able to produce things." And I think some of the homesteading idea and pursuing that and really that becoming almost a meme that a lot of people in our world do isn't bad, because you look at, I mean, the example that I like to use isn't the Mad Max scenario where. Right. Total societal breakdown, which I don't think is actually going to necessarily happen.
Yeah, either.
Things will look like if there's a collapse scenario is, right, the Soviet Union, when it collapsed, it wasn't like just complete total societal breakdown, although there were aspects of that for sure. But like Russia, regular Russians there would have been massive famine in the 90s if it wasn't part of their life, partly because of the Soviet Union, where they all had gardens that were productive because they didn't trust if the government was going to feed them.
Right.
So they kept gardens, many of them illegally, and kept the food that they produced, and that supplemented the food that the government gave them. And if they didn't have that, there would have been massive famine and millions of people would have starved to death in Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So to that end, like with homesteading, it's like, we could be in a scenario like that. And yeah, if you're growing tomatoes and potatoes in your backyard, that you're getting calories out of your backyard, like that's good. Like you should have that supplementary thing, but don't like think of it as, all right, it's going to be Mad Max and I'm going to be fending off, all these hordes of people with my rifle and then, but also tilling the soil and weeding it all day and taking care of chickens. And it's like, no, like if it gets to something like that, you'll be dead. Partly because you don't have people. And that leads back to the point on Brotherhood is what we need more than anything else is people, is numbers.
Right.
And not in this like slimy marketing centric big Eva mega church sort of way where it's like, oh, if we just market really well, we'll get 1,000 people. And but those aren't your people, right? They're not aligned with the same vision.
There are 1,000 atoms.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the people who picked up the phone and called, Governor Gavin Newsom when I wasn't wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Those are not your people. Those people are against you.
Yeah. So you want lots of people that are your people,
right?
And to have many of them and gathered together. So then, if you have a homesteading situation and there is a collapse, well, now you have like a company or a battalion strength that could fend off the hordes, right? I mean, this is the thing. Like where I'm in Minnesota, I remember sitting and watching. The Floyd riot happened in Minneapolis, like 90 miles away. And I'm sitting with like former military guys and they're watching this and they're like, no, these guys are moving in like coordinated formations. Like this is like watching a military operation. And they immediately they start thinking like, and they're like, what if they just like grabbed rifles and they just came down here? What would we do? Right? What would we do in a scenario like that where the government's not protecting you,
Yeah,
and,
who are you calling?
You're calling Kyle Rittenhouse,
right.
like what would we do in a scenario like this? They could come rampage and just destroy everything here. And what would we do as the people of this community? And that's a question I think a lot of communities should ask, is if there is chaos and widespread violence, things like that, which I don't think is like around the corner or anything like that, but just to have in the back of your head, like, what would you do? Who would you call? Who would you call to like protect your house and your family from masses of people that are willing to harm you? I mean, and like you look at history, you look at the history. This is something that I think people should read. Like they should read. If they make any book recommendation, besides my own, buy my book. It's the memoirs of Peter Wrangel, the general that led the White Army. Is really good during the Bolshevik Revolution. Because you see what happens when everything collapses and they're just hordes of violent criminal people that are ransacking everything. Like they went and they just murdered kulaks and stole all their stuff. And what happens if there's a situation even somewhat analogous to that here, right? What will we do? Where will you go? And the thing is, you need to have people that get it now and are on your side and willing to stand up and defend. Right, you need that, and I'm not saying like, all right, go form militias and invite the feds to entrap you and put you in prison. Right. I'm not saying that, right? Don't do that, but even have like loose organizations and associations of men that are committed to the same views and goals. Like having things like that locally, right? People that you know and that you trust and that love the same things you do. They love their country, love America, they love Jesus.
It's not an organized militia or anything like that.
Do not do that.
Right. What you're talking about though is just friends.
Yeah,
it's just having friends who are who have the same values that you have, and also a gun.
Yeah, and love your actual flesh and blood community that you're a part of, and the people there, and don't want to see it come to harm. Right. That's what you need, and you if you don't know these people in your community, like you need to develop roots in a place that you're at. Right. Or if it's not a place that you can do that, you need to go somewhere where you can have that. And begin to have lots of friends, right? And they don't necessarily need to be like your best buddies that you talk to every day, but they need to be people like you see at the grocery store and you say, hi, hey, how are you? How you been? You know, like people that you know, a little bit more than acquaintances, but people that you know that are on the same page with you, that are nearby. And a lot of people don't have that. And like we've talked about numerous times already, everything is set up for you not to have people that you're aware of that think like you do. But you can create that. You can strive toward having that, and it's imperative that we do that now.
And you might need to move to that. You might need to relocate to that. You also need to cultivate that. But with the relocation thing, even as the guy who wrote Fight by Flight, I would still say that better to be in a suburban area that's semi-purple, maybe even a little bit blue or whatever, with a church of 100 people that think like you.
Oh yeah.
Than to live in Kansas, but no one within a 50-mile radius.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of like that. And I think some people overreacted with the last 3 years of COVID and BLM, and all these kinds of things. And they're like, man, I need to I'm gonna homestead. I'm gonna start a garden. We're gonna get chickens. We're gonna get away from it. And I'm gonna buy a bunch of ammunition. I'm gonna get some guns, and I'm gonna get this, and I'm gonna get that. And it's like, okay, well, you're in a red tiny town, population 340 people, in a red state, and you've got 40 acres of land, and you've got this, and you've got that. But here's the one thing you don't have: friends.
People. Yeah.
I hesitate to use this example because maybe we can cut it out if it's too stupid. But
don't bring up the Avengers again.
One thing, no, it's not the Avengers. It's not the Avengers. But I was talking to you earlier about I like to look into like the Mafia and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
the mob and stuff. And of course, they're a criminal enterprise, and they're degenerates. We get that, right? But
where are you going with this?
But they had these neighborhoods, right? And they would operate in these neighborhoods, and it was known that was their territory, right? That was their neighborhood, and you had to respect their neighborhood. Right. And so you'd get scenes in a movie or a show where some thugs come into the pizzeria and you're just causing a disturbance or whatever, and they attack them, and they're like, "No, you're going to respect the pizzeria." Yeah, and it's like I'm not saying you should form a mafia, but they did have sort of a pride in their community. They didn't want their community to be the victim of, well, at least those thugs, I guess.
Yeah.
But their
own thuggery is a different question,
right? That's why it's a stupid example, I think. But there was sort of a pride in the neighborhood, like that's our coffee shop, that's our pizzeria. These are the places that we go, and we're going to keep it clean. We're going to keep it, a certain level of respectability, and you don't disrespect the neighborhood. I'm not saying to form a mafia, but do you care if your community gets disrespected or looks like trash or gets tagged by the local thugs or things like that? Or is it just, this is just a place where I live and I really don't care what happens to it? This is where I sleep. Right.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Is the place you live an economic zone that you are taking advantage of, or is it an actual place?
Is it an actual place?
Are you talking about America?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I am.
And this could be something as simple as, when I go to the park with my kids, if I see it's all trashed up, do I throw the trash in the trash can? Like that kind of stuff. Like, or is this just, like you said, an economic zone that I just happen to be at right now, and then maybe tomorrow I won't be here? There's got to be some sense. I mean, even the Mafia had some sense. It is distorted, but some sense of community.
This is my town.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep, you're right. It's a great point.
Well, and I think you should sort of form things like that. I mean, not devoted to criminal enterprise, obviously, but still, like there's a certain civic pride that you're trying to describe there, and I think you're right that. We should have things like that where we take pride in the place that we're from and that we live and that our children are growing up in, the community that we're part of, if it's possible to. I mean, some places, like if you're living in Portland, you can't really do that. But even, it's funny, like I spoke well of homesteading, a second ago, and I'm going to go the opposite direction and speak well of suburbs. But suburbs are like literally designed to be anti-civil disorder, anti-riot, it's anti-riot technology. Like, you look at how they're designed, even driving around in like the Austin suburbs here, you see them and it's like the GPS the other day where it was taking us to dinner and it's like it took us through a suburban residential area and you could tell right away, like, I'm not supposed to be here. I don't belong in this. This is not and like there's cul-de-sacs everywhere and everything. Like, and if you're not supposed to be there, everybody knows.
Everyone,
You're not from here. You don't belong in our cul-de-sac, and they're organized and structured in that way where masses of people that shouldn't be there, it's easy to for like police to trap them in there and round them up.
And we make fun of it, but the whole idea of an HOA, so like, I mean, there are bad things, about an HOA. It's, I like to think of it as like neighborhood socialism, but
that's right.
but there is that other sense of it's like a bunch of people who care. And sometimes it's like they care way too much, but still it's nice.
And they're like lording over people.
It's like that guy was a hall monitor, when he was
finally I have some power. Your shrubs are too tall.
Even in my neighborhood, it's funny, like some of the guys, and they're great guys, but like it's like for no other purpose. And we don't have, like, I live in a suburb. It's not like we have acres of land, but they have I forget what they're called, but it's like basically a glorified golf cart. It's better than a golf cart. You would get it like, you see them at the Bass and Pro shops and stuff like that. And so like they're driving, that's what they do. Like when on their time off, when they're done with work, it's a Saturday, the kids get in, mom gets in, dad's, like kind of, I'm a big deal. And he's driving through the suburbs and we're going to the pool. It's like, you could have walked to the pool or taken your normal car, but no, we're driving this little gator, thing. And like, and,
we have that in my town too. That's great. That's in rural Minnesota.
We're driving the gator to the neighborhood pool, and there's Gerald, he's the HOA president, and he really cares. But here's the deal.
It's a status symbol in the suburbs.
It's a status thing. But here's the thing though. They know who lives here.
Yeah, exactly.
If they know the cars that belong on this street parallel parked, that car doesn't belong.
Yeah. Who is that?
Right. And if it was there for more than a day, even overnight, it's like, we're going to ask a couple questions. That's kind of nice.
And maybe you get bothered by like the nosy neighbors and things like that, but it's like at the same time, like that's good. Like, you want people that care about the area.
Right.
Yeah. And so, no, I think living in a place like that, it's just that so often these are vehicles of atomization too, where the people pull into their driveway and you never talk to them. I've lived in suburbs like that.
That's true.
So you have to like work really hard to overcome that mentality, and some people just don't want to. They like the anonymity of it. But they exist as actual neighborhoods too, and there's communities, and there can be civic pride in these places too. So like the suburbs are not like, everyone loves to rag on them and say like, oh, the suburbs are horrible. Like, they're the reason we have all the freeways and the urban sprawl and all these problems. And it's like, well, it is that way, partly because over the last 50 or 60 years, we allowed the cities to become just these dens of crime and decay. I mean, you look back 60 or 70 years ago of like videos or even pictures of large cities, and they're places where families were and people just walked around, and it was very, very safe and very clean. And so it's not like we just somehow forgot how to live in cities and now we have to live in suburbs. There are policy reasons why
it was intentional.
Happened. Yeah.
We let our cities go to hell.
Yeah. And so someday, you know, when there's a
and then you're going to blame people because they don't want to live there.
Yeah, there's there'll be a reconquista, right? It'll happen.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Where, you know, the cities will be put to sword and fire, right? and then resettled by people who want to live in an ordered, safe community.
The suburbs of the Red Cross will go and conquer this. That's right. Eventually, that's what we're doing. We're just waiting to mount our attack.
Yeah,
you know?
Because cities are important. I mean, everyone wants to think like on the right, especially among Christians, that it's like, oh, we just want to flee to safety, flee to the suburbs or flee to the rural area. And it's like, no, cities are important. I mean, God cares about cities a ton. They're central. I mean, I'm going to sound
He's the God of the city.
Yeah, I'm going to sound like Tim Keller here, you know, and say, oh, for the city. But it's like, well, his was, we'll just baptize this, you know, Sodom, right, and call it good. And I'm like, no, I want my city to be like the New Jerusalem and strive to be. Obviously, you're not going to make it that way and make it utopian, but you can have stable, well-ordered, high-trust societies in a large metropolitan area. But it takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and time to create that. It doesn't happen out of nowhere. Like those things, again, it's the cathedral that's been burned down, or it's Chesterton's fence that's been ripped out. And it takes a long time to put those things back together.
Right. Easy to undo it, but hard to build it back.
Yeah.
But worth the attempt to do it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, imagine a Christian New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a sight to behold.
Classic, well, it is a sight to behold. You know, the classic picture that they'll show is from like maybe it's 1969 or something like that, but it's Easter.
Yeah,
it's that evening.
Yeah,
and it's the
the Empire State Building,
and the Twin Towers. I think is that what it is?
I can't remember which.
It's the Chrysler
building.
One
other building.
Crosses
like,
lit
with
up.
3 crosses. And it's like
and now we have
not that long ago.
Yeah, now we have pride flags lit up.
What's amazing? It's even more like,
but that was Manhattan.
Orbed.
Yeah, Manhattan.
We've got the pride stuff. But then, of course, you know, when the Jets play, it's green and white, and when the Giants play, you know, and so they just put all of the elements of trash world. That's what we project on the Empire State Building now.
Exactly. Yeah, no doubt. And you know, one day we'll retake them.
The danger of centralized power is often represented by the word king. As Americans, we hate the word king. Civilian ownership of body armor is about helping people to have increased power to resist tyrants and criminals. And so, Armored Republic is about helping you to preserve your God-given rights to the honor of the Lord Jesus Christ, because He is the King of Kings, and He governs kings and He will judge them. This is Armored Republic, and in a republic, there is no king but Christ. We are free craftsmen, and we are honored to be your armorsmith of choice.
Yeah, we want this episode to be like all white pills, you know, like we're gonna win, and we're gonna make it, and we are. I think we are. It's that it's gathering people together who think like you do and have become awake, and it doesn't even have to be the majority of people. That's the other thing. Like, I mean, the classic example that everyone uses is that like the American Revolution was like 3 to 5% of the population of the colonies actually rebelled against King George. The rest were either on the fence or even opposed them. And so you don't need 50% or 60 or 70% majorities in order to produce cultural change. I mean, just look at the negative cultural change that has occurred.
The Sodomites.
Right? How many homosexuals are there? There's not that many, you know, but they're able to push and push and push.
40 years ago.
No.
Right now, the frogs are gay. Everybody's gay now.
Right.
You know, but 40 years ago, like you're talking way less than 3% of the population, and they effectively replaced the American flag with the rainbow. Like that's quite an accomplishment in 40 years. Yeah. In the span of one generation. Yeah. And all that was written out, like, you know, manifestos and very clear, like, I mean, like
this is the goal.
These were
this
goals.
Is what we want
militant,
to do.
It was tactical, and they executed. And so why can't Christians, you know, Christian nationalists, you know, with
this
3%,
is the stage we're at right now. Writing out and figuring out what it is we actually want to do. That's why there's so much fighting right now. Yeah. Because that's the stage we're at. We're not at the stage of actually, you know, doing this. We're figuring out what we actually want to do.
Right. You're right.
Then you cast a vision, you figure out tangible goals that you want to accomplish. And then you bring people on board.
Well, and that's where the pushback is right now. Like the 80s, you're absolutely right. I'm glad you brought that up because we're in the stage of not even doing it. We're in the stage of just writing out our manifesto. We're in the stage of writing out, this is what we want to do. And so when you think about it though, like what is the biggest pushback that like the three of us, and our comrades online, like what's the thing that we get the most pushback for? It's all the practical steps.
That's right.
So it's like, hey, you know what?
How are you going to do this?
So you're dreaming, you're LARPing. It's like, okay, we are dreaming and we're praying, but we're also asking that God would help us. We know we're not there, but we're working towards it and we're trying to be practical. So here are some things. And like all of our posts, that's really what it is. It's just, okay, so what can I do today? Oh, okay, so this week on Twitter, what's the big thing? Like, we discovered that maybe it's a good idea if guys work out.
If they're in shape.
Like if we're not fat and sick. So, okay, step one, don't die. Don't die. The libs are killing themselves. The libs will die. Let's try not to die. So like if all the libs live for 60 years, because they eat, trash world food.
That's right.
Let's live for 80 years.
That's right.
And have 20 extra years. So let's work out. And then of course, what is Christianity's response to it?
That's an idol.
That's terrible. Like, because they want to lose. And that's what this comes down to. I think most of the pushback that we get, sadly, it's from Christians. It's not from a bunch of God-hating leftists. It's from Christians. And the reason they push back is because if we actually did win, then it would discount the last 50 years of what they've been preaching.
Everything they've done.
They've done. Because here's the thing. If we could win, then what that essentially says is that not that they lost, because they definitely lost, but that they lost and that they didn't have to lose.
They could have done something different.
It shows, you weren't losing because dispensational premillennialism was true. No, you were losing because you're a loser. You were losing sinfully, not righteously.
You intended to lose.
This is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You shot yourself in the foot. You made yourself and others lose. Oh my goodness, that's wicked. And so if people saw that, you lose your ministry, you lose your platform, you lose your influence, all these kind of things. Your donations dry up, a lot of bad things happen. So of course, you need the Christian nationalists to shut up.
And be wrong.
Be wrong. But all that back to AD's point, because it's a good point, is, W's in the chat. This is our last episode. What can we do? Practical takeaways. And some of these, they seem so menial and so practical. It almost, and this is the pushback that we get.
You sound stupid saying it almost.
But
you should have friends.
Exactly. But that's what it is. So it's have friends, work out, don't die. Have
children,
and teach them not to die.
Get married, have a gun, get married, have children, don't put them in public school, own property. And if you can, then buy a second property.
Build things.
Try
build
it
productive
if you can.
property.
Not everyone's going to own their own business, but if you can,
do it.
Avail yourself to do it. Like Paul's saying, like if you're a slave, but you can gain your freedom, great. Then
Go do it.
So start when in doubt. If it's available to you, all things being equal, own a business and don't just work and build someone else's wealth. If you're a boomer, right? Then help out.
The next generation.
Build it. Pass down some generational wealth. But if two of your kids are idiots and two of them are wise, then let the inheritance, let the will reflect that.
By the way, this is a good reason why you shouldn't get angry with the people that are antagonistic towards us, because at the end of the day, they are going to lose,
right?
Because at the end of the day, when we're getting stronger, when we're having healthy families, when we're having healthy businesses, when we're not dying, all these things that we're talking about here.
Even though the conditions in every direction are totally opposing you to accomplish those things.
Right.
And you're still doing it.
You're still doing it. And then again, we're having fun doing it.
Yes.
It is attractive. They are 100% right to feel that way, that it's attractive, and they're worried it's attractive because it's evil, but it actually is attractive. And so we're gonna
anything fun must be evil. Yeah.
We're gonna get numbers too.
You're right.
We're gonna get numbers too.
That's a good point.
Yeah, the numbers will come.
Yes.
Right, because people are attracted to someone with a vision of winning.
And especially, a particular kind of people that are attracted to that? Males. Men. And especially young men. So it's like, hey, so we're doing this. Here's some of our ideas. And they're like, that's who's, you look at the Gospel Coalition footage for their conference, and it's all chicks.
All gals,
It's all chicks and some men who are, much older. Right. But then you come to a Right Response conference, and it's like, it's all dudes. You go to Fight Laugh Feast, it's a bunch of young dudes. Even our YouTube channel, it's I think it's close to 78% male audience. And I love that.
Yeah.
You know, because
My
everybody else
small
hates
one is
them.
like 98% male.
Yeah, there you go. But like, because everybody,
My wife is the only one that
right, there you go. But everybody hates the men. So I'm happy to be a guy who, you know, has a ministry that predominantly is being, you know, viewed by men.
Well, and I think about this, you know, just in terms of like politics kind of parallels this. And I remember back to like 2015 and 2016, and you would see, you know, like Trump rallies, right? And who are the people in the crowd in Trump rallies? A lot of it would be, you know, older boomers, of course, but there were young men there, and like getting young men. I was involved in GOP politics in college and intermittently throughout my life. It never was young men at all. They had no desire, because young men are busy, you know, building families and working and doing the things they do. It's the older people with time that get involved. But here they are, like 20 and 30-year-old men filling, you know, by tens of thousands filling these crowds. And what do they go to see? They go to see a guy say, "We're going to win so much. You're going to be sick and tired of how much we win. Sick and tired of it." You know, like that's, but you hear that, and it's like, that's the opposite of anything that the GOP has said for decades. It's like, well, we keep losing. Here's how we can maybe lose a little bit slower and slow it down. And this is my plan, right? And we're going to lower your taxes a little, right? That was their vision. But here you have a guy that says, we're going to win. We should win. We should make, our country was great. It's not great anymore. We're going to make it great again. And it's like, wow, what a compelling vision. Like, and of course, like, he didn't accomplish it. So like, people are going to watch this like, oh, he's just shilling for Donald Trump. Like, no, he did accomplish it. It didn't happen. But even just throwing the idea out there that maybe possibly we should try to, I don't know, win. Draws people in, like, yeah, that's great. Let's try to win. How about that? And so it's the same thing here, where it's like, no, we should play to win a game, because Joel, you know, eschews sports, you know, and sports ball, but maybe his wife and her family can talk to him. but like,
you masculine wife.
That's right. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'll talk to, you know, to AD, you know, like if you've been on a sports team and it's always been bad, and the coach is an idiot, he doesn't know how to coach, and you don't have very much talent on the team, and you just expect to lose. Like, that is miserable.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
To be on a team. And even if you're a good player on the team, but everybody else is terrible, and like, you get up into the batter's box, or you line up on the field, and it's like, you know, you're going to lose before the first pitch or before the first snap or whatever. Like, that's a horrible position to be in. And it's like, even if you personally have this like drive to win, like, I'm going to play as hard as I can and I'm going to win every rep. Well, you know, you're still going to lose by 40. Yeah. Right. And it's just miserable for you, even if you have it in you to want to win. But then when you're on a team where, even if you're not good, and so I could speak from experience, like, when I'm on a team and I'm not the best player, everybody else is pretty good, and you all want to win, you have a good coach. And then when you do, it feels so good. Yeah. And there's this camaraderie you have with other guys where you're striving for this goal and you finally accomplish it. And there's nothing in the world like it. And men want that. Yeah. Right. They want to be on a winning team. Right. And of course, you know, the pietists will be like, well, we are on the winning team. We're on Jesus' team. He won the victory, and he's going to come back and everything thousands of years in the future, or maybe tomorrow. But
no, for those guys, it's tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm not going to have to do anything to accomplish that. Right. Right. I'm going to lose down here. Right. And continue losing. And that's
really winning.
What kind of vision is that? Like, how many young men are like, come join our losing team. We're going to keep losing until Jesus just snaps his fingers and wins it all for us. Like that. Nobody wants that. You can see why very few young men are compelled by this vision at all. And of course, it's like, you know, the detractor would say, oh, well, this is just, you preach against pragmatism, but this is just a pragmatic argument. Like, you're saying winning for the sake of winning, but that's not what the Bible teaches. And I'm like, I think it does. Yeah, right? I think it does. Like, God wants his people to have victory, and he leads his people to victory. The word gospel, it means announcement of victory, right? Announcement of victory. Like, you would go preach the gospel. You're preaching the victory of Jesus Christ. Right. And, you know, and you preach it in that vein. And if your announcement of Jesus Christ's victory is you need to go lose, which doesn't mean, right, that maybe you're going to be martyred, or maybe you are going to suffer, but that is a victory, of course. But that martyrdom produces victory, even here on the earth. That's right. Right. That's how the early church viewed it. It wasn't like, we lose down here, so I'm going to go get torn apart by lions, and that's good. It's, my blood is going to be spilled and it's going to be poured out on the ground and it's going to bear, fruit of 60 or 100-fold.
Right.
Right. That's what, losing in that context, how it means winning. Not we just lose and we're going to lose some more and we're going to keep on losing, because losing is good for the church.
Right.
Right. It's good. It's good for the church to suffer, because then we're really pure.
Right. Then we're pure.
But you see, like, history, and even in the Bible, even in the New Testament, like the suffering that the church underwent, there still were grifters and charlatans.
Yes.
Even then.
Right. With
Even
immense
then.
persecution, with colosseums and lions and being, drawn and quartered and sawed in two, you also have the highest prevalence of heresy ever. Like going, so to say that like you can have suffering or you can have heresy. That's just a false dichotomy.
Yeah, you look today and it's like, okay, the church is in the worst shape we've been in, and we're about to experience like real, genuine persecution and suffering. Right. And you still have Russell Moores and David French's and J.D. Greer's that doing the things that they do, and they're going to continue operating that way.
And that's just one group of guys. That's because we've gotten to the point where we don't even mention the Benny Hinn's and the Kenneth Copelands anymore.
We don't even have to at that point.
So we've got plenty of heresy. And it's not because of Christendom. You can have heresy when religion, like Bunyan would say in Pilgrim's, when religion is dressed in her glass slippers and her robes, and applauded as she walks down the street. Like when religion is adorned and praised, you can have heresy. And when religion is in shambles, and persecuted and hiding, on the run for her life, you can have heresy. Throughout the church age, we've seen in both regards. Speaking of heresy and heretics, I'm going to say something a little bit spicy here, but
you haven't done that yet.
And you guys can rein me back in. I'm not even making a statement here. I'm just gonna raise the question. Here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Just noticing.
When you think about heretics, one of the big themes throughout Scripture is that they always appeal to the women. The heretics, when you look at like who's funding their ministry, you know what I mean? Like who are the people in their pews? You know what I mean? Who are they're following? Their following is predominantly. I was just thinking about earlier. We were saying 98% male, 78% male. But there's so many people within big and mid-Eva that would point to us and say you've gone off the rails. You guys are heretics. You're exactly. Post-millennialism. This is heresy. Or whatever it is. Whatever they're saying. Working out heresy. Owning a gun heresy. Which none of that is.
To be fair to Medieval, they'd say heresy-like.
Heresy-like, wolf-like. I've been called wolf-like. Yeah. But I was explicitly
with
told,
an E or not?
No E.
Sorry.
But I was told that because I said India, somebody said, one day India, I pray that one day India would be Christian. I retweeted and said, Jesus wills it and it will be done. Which is just classic post-millennialism. I'm just saying the nations belong to him. It is God's will, and it's just a matter of time. I'm not saying I'm going to do it. And literally, that was retweeted by someone saying, "Here it is, the new name it and claim it prosperity gospel." That was literally the tweet. I was like, "Whoa, what?" Number one, I'm talking about the salvation of India, not a Ferrari. And number two, I said He wills it. That is Christ, not Joel, not me naming it and claiming it.
And He said He does.
And he said He did in His word. I didn't have a personal vision. So anyways, here's the point though. That guy and other guys like him, I'm not going to call them wolf-like. They're not heretics. No. They're not.
They're just
dumb.
Confused.
They're dumb, but they're not heretics. Now that said though, who follows them? How do these guys have I'm talking about guys who have more Twitter followers than I do. And I literally will ask the question sometimes I'm like, how? Is this guy is he secretly related to John MacArthur? Is this like a grandson? You know how Joe Biden has the 8th grandchild, that he won't acknowledge? Maybe this guy's the grandson of John MacArthur, but he was just too dumb that MacArthur doesn't want to publicly acknowledge that they're related. And so I'm looking at some of these guys. And I'm thinking, I'm not being facetious. Maybe there's got to be a reason.
There's some nepotism
there's
here.
There's no way in real life that this guy could have a following. It's just everything he says is so unintelligent. There's no way. But then I look at the following, and hear me, I'm not trying to be harsh here. It's all older women.
That's right. That's right.
It's all older women. That is the following. And I'm sure that the Apostle John, as he's writing, 1 John, or Paul, I'm sure they felt this way about some of the heretics of their day. They're like, you take weak-willed women and you lure them astray. And
that's what Jesus says about the Pharisees. They devour widows' households.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the same thing where it's like you you get these women.
You get the women
who are widows that have the wealth that their husbands built up and they're living off of it after he's passed away, and you just sweep them up into whatever you're saying and manipulate them, and that's very, very common. Right. Yeah,
that's not. I'm not saying this is a one size fits all. So I'm not saying
they're doing it intentionally.
I'm not saying, hey, men, right? Because back to your point about like it was a bunch of men at Trump rallies. So it's not to say, hey, if Trump had a bunch of men, then Trump must be solid.
He must be righteous.
He must be righteous. Yeah, no, that's not what we're saying. Yeah. So, but it's not a one size fits all. It's not a guarantee. But what I am saying is, I think that's how the disclaimer, how I preface this whole thing. I said, I just want to raise a question. Yeah. I think it's worth questioning. It's just worth considering, thinking about, praying about. Is there something to be said for your current gatekeepers within Big and Mid Eva, their predominant following, their donations, their supporters, their this, their that, are all women?
Can I say something else here? It's related, I think, because what if you go on Twitter and Christian Twitter, right? What is the kind of tone that gets warned about the most? It's all of us get the same criticism. You're an angry young man. I've got a harsh tone. You've got a whatever tone.
You're proud.
It's those kind of tones, right?
Yeah.
What are the tones that the Bible warns about? It's the smooth talkers.
Speech. Yeah,
it's the ones with buttery words. It's the ones that smooth talk you. That's what the Bible warns about.
Amen.
Yeah.
That does not mean that my tone is always, dead on point and I'm doing the right things all the time. That's not what I'm saying.
I can't see it in how I speak. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that disconnect,
that says
disconnect.
Something. Yep.
That says something.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the language piece, AD, because those are two things worth considering. If you have a movement that is, because they would say this movement it cannot be of the Spirit of God when it's worldly and vain and harsh tone, and it's marked by anger but on the flip side, just to be fair, and that's not to say that there isn't real sin in areas to grow and ways to repent, but on the flip side, we got plenty of Bible on our side to just flip that argument and say, yeah, but what about the church movement? Is it of the Spirit of God if the only people that follow these male teachers are women?
Yeah,
and that
it's marked by flowery speech and smooth talking.
Smooth. Yeah.
Yeah,
and they go on cruises to talk about persecution. A persecution cruise. And that was not that long. 2017,
2014 or 15.
Okay,
I think. It was a while
still
ago.
Less than 10 years ago. Less than 10 years ago on a cruise, and the topic is persecution,
is suffering. Yeah,
so it's just, I'm just saying, if we want to play that game, well, you guys, you're the only people that are following you are young men. Well, hot diggity dog.
Good. We're gonna win, guys. I mean, honestly, we. Just recently, actually, I think they're still there at the time of this recording. People are touring the ruins of Christendom, right. And you and I and you would see, wow, what a thing, man! It was so amazing. Like, we need to get this back. This is just so glorious. They just love the Lord, and they did these amazing things.
The whole civilization loved Jesus so much they built cathedrals.
So we see that stuff. You know what? That's attractive. They see it and say, "This is the dangers of church and state, and this is what they're touring the glories of Christendom, and they're seeing
this cathedral a troubling reminder of
and they're seeing their negativity. They're just bringing their negativity with them to that. And honestly, we're gonna win, guys. That cannot survive.
That team doesn't score points.
That doesn't survive. They don't want stupid.
To. Yeah, they're committed to losing. It's like they get the football and it's all right. All right, first play on the play sheet is kneel down.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. It's the first quarter, and and you're already down. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's so white pilling to see stuff like that. It's funny too. Like, we can all joke about it and laugh and make our memes and stuff, but they cannot win doing the things that they're doing.
They're committed to not winning.
Yeah.
And you see that, and it isn't just like that particular group. It's so much of evangelicalism is, even though they talk about evangelism, and evangelism is like the highest priority, and we care so much about evangelism, but you just evangelize people into making a profession of faith for Jesus, but then living just like the rest of trash world.
Yeah.
And it's committed to losing in a different way.
That's right.
But ultimately, it's still all about losing. It's not about building faithful communities People, having like we've talked about before, having their theology come out of their fingertips and affecting every single part of their life.
Right.
It's not committed to those kinds of things. It's committed to just, loosely baptizing what already exists, calling it Christian, doing the Tim Keller thing that he does to Manhattan and just saying, okay, you're Christian. Yeah, you believe in abortion and homosexuality and all this kind of stuff, every liberal thing that there is, but you kind of like Jesus and you're intrigued a little bit by Christianity. Well, come to my church, right? Rather than going to Manhattan and saying, thus saith the Lord. That's right. Right. And just preaching his words that this is what God says and get with it or not. Like going there like Jonah going to Nineveh.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And yeah, maybe you're not gonna have thousands of people, right? You'll maybe just be this vanguard of a few dozen people in Manhattan. But that is way better.
It's way better. And here's something even better maybe than that. You could also leave Manhattan.
Yeah.
And
let it burn.
And let it kill itself.
Yeah.
Because that's what Trash World does.
Yeah.
Trash World is self-defeating. It is suicidal.
Yeah.
Because God's design, what he's built into the fabric of his natural created order is that it lends towards fruitfulness. It lends towards longevity. It lends towards health and life and these kinds of, and when you directly rebel against
more
that,
name it and claim it stuff.
right?
Here we go.
And when you directly rebel against that, it lends towards destruction. It lends towards a short life and death and so that's part of the judgment that God brings. So again, I'm not saying there are no caveats, there are no exceptions. Some people really are called. Missionary is a legitimate biblical category. However, I do think that right now, by and large, on the whole, so this is not a one size fits all, but on the whole, I do think that right now, Christians have spread themselves too thin. I think that's what we did the last 15, 20 years with church planting, urban church planting in the city, for the city. We spread ourselves too thin. And so you got all these guys who, some of them just like Keller sold out and the city discipled them far more than they discipled the city. Yeah. And then the ones who, what you just described, sure, they're faithful. And there's 10 people in their church, but it's like, dude, but the guy is actually, he's not a 10-person pastor. He's a rock star. Yeah. And if he would fall back, and this is where you guys made fun of me for being fake and gay, but if he would fall back, Avengers Assemble, kind of thing, right? But and join another team. And then you start building juggernauts, Moscow.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's what the guys in Ogden are trying to do. And rebuilding, that's apologia,
rebuilding Christendom, even before Trash World collapses. Right. That's part of it too, that's right. Capturing the vision of what we want things to look like in 500 years. Right. And spending the rest of our lives and directing our children, our grandchildren, and all the other descendants that we get to meet while we're still alive and kicking, and saying, this is the vision, this is the goal, this is what we want to build, and building it up. And making it strong and resilient and anti-fragile, right? Getting stronger even as it faces opposition. Building those things up while the other thing is still standing, because it's going to come down. Right. And if it comes down and you haven't been building these things up in the meantime, the chaos is even going to be worse. Right. That's the other thing to think about. Is like if you face a situation in America, or if we face a situation in America like the collapse of the Soviet Union in 20 years, in 10 years, and there are no mediating institutions. There are no businesses. There are no Christian schools. There's no churches. There's no real flesh and blood communities, and you're just all alone, right? That's a bad place to be in. But if you've been spending the last 20 years building those things up, places and people that are resilient, and maybe that includes having chickens. I don't know, right? But you're building those things up. Then when all that stuff comes tumbling down and times are really hard for everyone else, you kind of have an ark to go in that's going to float right above everything else. And you're going to be like Forrest Gump's shrimp boat, right? When it goes out into the hurricane, and then the hurricane smashes all the boats that are at port, right? And now he's the king of shrimp in Alabama, right? Right. And he reaps the rewards, like the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. That's how that happens. Is you build Christendom, you build these things, and then God comes in with the scythe and harvest all of it.
Well, that's been Doug's
whole
thing recently that he's been talking about. He's saying like, okay, but God sometimes takes forever to do something suddenly. And part of the problem, you want to sit here and talk about how the Crusades were terrible and blah, blah, blah. But first, probably you should know a little bit better, historically what happened. But beyond that, whatever faults really did happen with Constantine or, anybody else, part of it is that this was all of a sudden Christians who were, the object of persecution found themselves in power overnight,
Instantly.
very, very suddenly.
Yeah.
And that tends to be, if you look throughout, history, that tends to be the way that God providentially works, is that, there's faithfulness and it's slow and it's slow. So the same thing that we quoted, earlier about like, well, with Hemingway, how'd you go bankrupt? Well, slowly at
Gradually.
first, and then all of a sudden, and then suddenly. So gradually and then suddenly. Well, I think in the same way, how does Christendom come? Well, gradually and then suddenly. And so my point is having these kinds of conversations about Christian nationalism and political theology and
Christendom,
Christendom, and about all these kind of, it's like, well, you guys are LARPing, or you guys are, no, look, you don't want to get
Everyone
flogged.
is LARPing.
Yeah, but here's the deal: you don't want to get flogged.
Yeah.
Okay, Baptists, you don't want to get flogged.
Yeah.
Great. You know one thing that would help? Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it before we get there.
Yeah.
Let's not wait till suddenly in the providence of God, he chooses to judge trash world and throws the
Presbyterians in control.
That's right.
But he judges, trash world and throws, Christians a bone that
had
we
the same
don't
thought.
deserve.
That's right.
Let's not figure it out then. Let's figure it out now.
Yeah.
That's right.
Talk about it now. That's not LARPing. That's actually, but see, I'm going against myself here. I say that's not LARPing, but really, for the guys that we're talking about, for them it is. Because for them, truly, as God is their witness, in terms of what they're convinced of, in their theological framework, there is no possible scenario that God would ever, ever, ever allow that level of Christian victory again.
They cannot fathom or conceptualize it whatsoever.
Yeah, it can't happen.
It cannot possibly occur.
Yeah, they're not quite sure how it occurred in the past.
Yeah.
But they know that the fact that it did occur
Constantine was bad.
It was evil and sinister and corrupt.
Yeah.
That's the only way it ever occurred in the past, and it'll never occur in the future. And so that's why when we have these conversations, they're like, "You silly, whippersnappers." It's like you're 5 years older than you do. But you're LARPing and you're not real, serious people. And it's like, no, God's done this again. And my Bible tells me that he's promised that he's going to do it. He's done it before. He's going to do it again. It may not be in my lifetime, but we need to have these kinds of conversations. You think that things were done poorly before. Well, I think you're probably wrong, but I'm sure it wasn't perfect. Nothing's perfect. So let's talk about how we can improve it. That's why the name of the conference that, I'm doing in March, it is Blueprints for Christendom 2.0.
Yeah.
Like saying sure, we can maybe do better.
We can have it, and we can have it better than it was before. Yeah. We can take the experience of the past and build upon it.
And learn.
Yeah. And it is so funny that they treat it like, oh, it's a LARP. And it's like, well, how does anything that is currently not extant come into being?
Right. Someone thinks about it and talks about it and plans.
You have to have ideas that that are attractive, that people want to pursue and then carry out into reality.
That's right.
Right. And that's the stage that we're at right now. And no one denies that, right? Stephen Wolfe isn't out there thinking like, no, we are a Christian nation right now. We just have to snap our fingers and say the magic words, and then boom, kind of like the like a lot of QAnon people today think like there's some secret admiralty law that the government is bound by. like that's really a thing, is they think like, oh, there's like the property law of the Bank of England, and that's what they're actually under, and so that's why the Patriots are still in control, right? I mean, I think they think that we think that about Christian nationalism, that like the Christians, we're still in control of everything. We just are pretending that we aren't, or something like that. I think that's what they think, that how we're operating, right? And you see the libs do this, like Mike Johnson just became the Speaker of the House, and he's a Southern Baptist and a creationist.
Christian nationalism is
it's like he's a Christian nationalist. They're taking over and everything. And it's like, I mean, the guy's first priority is to give $100 billion to Israel.
He's a Jewish nationalist.
Yeah, he's a Zionist. But his first priority is not, making America a Christian nation.
Right.
Like that's not the first thing he's doing. He's not even like securing the American border, right? Like that. Like if you talk to the run of the mill Christian nationalist leader, friends that we have, right, the first thing they would do if they're Speaker of the House is, all right, $100 billion to just build a giant wall and a moat and machine gun nests along the border, and that's step one. Like things like that. That would be just the obvious one, right?
Right.
But we don't have that. We don't have power. We know that we are out of power. Like these guys talk all the time about how, we're in exile. We're exiles on the, and I'm like, Yeah, we kind of are for the moment.
Right now.
In one sense, we are, but we're not going to be forever.
Right.
Like this world belongs
our
to
home.
Jesus.
Yep, that's
And we need to work to realize his reign and rule and work to make all of the nations of this world, all the kingdoms of this world, the kingdom of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And how does that happen? It doesn't mean we like just assemble a massive army and point guns at people and say, you will convert or die.
Dude.
Right? But that's why they think that we
they're still saying forced conversions.
Yeah. Yeah. No one says that.
No one has
Nobody.
said that. No one has ever said that.
Yeah.
No, none of us.
No.
So, yeah.
No,
It's crazy.
we're not saying anything
Even the
remotely like it.
ridiculous Anon accounts don't even say that.
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone say
Yeah,
it.
they'll say other stuff that's like
Yeah, there's
wild.
other stuff I'm like, okay, I disagree.
But they won't
But
say
that one, no one said
Nobody
that.
believes that.
But that is still
Yeah.
insisted again and again and again. These guys hold to forced conversions.
Yeah,
You know,
they,
like,
they don't have. I mean, even if you say like, "Hey, we don't want people to like blaspheme Jesus' name," and we're
Right.
going to try to put a stop to that,
Right, and they'll say
but
that's
internally
forced
you can believe
conversions.
whatever you want,
right. Uh-huh.
We're not going to force you to like change your heart and believe
But in
Jesus.
the public square, you
Yeah.
can't have a dude dressed up like Jesus and then a nun
And
gyrating in front of him.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're not going to allow that.
Sorry.
Yeah, there are decency laws that
Yeah.
always existed in American history until their wonderful democratic pluralist society came in the middle of the 20th century.
Right.
Right before that, it's like no. Those people would have been in jail right away.
Right away.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
In every part of the most liberal part of the country, straight to jail.
Jail.
They're going to do what they have to do, and we're just going to have to do what we have to do.
Right.
That's the ultimate white pill. You actually don't need, the powers that be
just
and
step right over
evangelicalism.
them.
You don't need the
You
stamp
don't
of
need
approval.
them to
Yeah.
approve of anything.
Right.
Yeah, you just keep going.
You just keep going.
Yeah, just pretend they don't exist.
And we will get canceled. But here's one of the cool things that I'm learning about the cancel thing is like when people cancel you, what you do is like you just say no. Like what was it? I think it was it was The Office. It was Stanley. It was Stanley, and Michael Scott's is like corporate's like forcing him to fire someone, and so it's like this terrible Friday. He's like you got to fire one person.
Stanley,
he hasn't even decided,
yeah.
and so he's just he's giving it a try on each of these people. Like you're fired, and trying, and he tries it on Stanley. And, so he's like, Stanley, I need to see you in my office. And he comes in his office and he's like, Stanley, I'm sorry. I gotta let you go. You're fired. And Stanley just laughs and he says, you're fired. You're fired. And he says it right back to, and he goes back to his desk and just keeps working. And so, but my point is just like, people are going to, they're going to cancel us. They're going to say, well, Joel, you weren't qualified to be a pastor when you first tried to plant a church. And I'll say, yeah, I've been saying that on every podcast for 7 years. I know that.
Yeah.
Everyone in my church knows that. And anybody who needs to know that knows that. Or AD, you're harsh and you're this. And it's like, that's cute. You're fired. You just keep going. And it's just like, we don't, so you're right. You just keep going.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have the power over you to stop you anyway, if they wanted to.
Yeah,
all they can do is just attack you and slander you and accuse you of things that you don't believe.
Right.
And meanwhile, the people that are capable of getting it are going to listen to what you have to say and join you and continue marching toward the same
And that
goal.
goes back to your point. Here's the beauty, the hopeful thing. You don't need that many people.
No.
Not at first, not for leadership, not for getting the ball rolling. So it's like, because it does work. The smear campaigns work. There's a reason why people do it. So people will get slandered. And
you look at how much like Doug gets slandered.
oh yeah, totally, and it works. And
Yeah.
Here's how I know it works. It worked because there were a few years that I didn't. I held him at bay, at arm's length. But then eventually, I looked into him and I was like, well, actually, he's pretty good. And yes, there are some stories, but he's got some, some answers to that.
And he just kept going.
And he just kept going.
That's the thing.
Like,
He just kept
everyone
going,
said, you're
taking
not
in stride.
Yeah, he was just like, no, I'm just going to do it.
All the people, right? The highest value people, right? The brightest, the most competent, the hardest working, right? Those young guys and gals, they're going to be wanting to win, right? They're going to be on the side that wants to win, and they're going to apply all of their energy and effort and the skills and abilities that God has given them to win,
Right.
rather than just waste them in losing for the rest of their lives.
You're right. Yep. Well, that's it. That's our series. I hope that it's been helpful for everybody who's listened. And and by God's grace, we'll see. Maybe in the future we'll do something like this again.
All right.
Awesome.
All right.